Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to a new series by Popcorn Theology. We're very excited to release our first episode of In the Lobby, where we're going to be having topical content released in segments 15 to 20 minutes long on a weekly basis. And so we're going to be dropping these episodes every week. And they're going to be things like discussions with our hosts, interviews with outside guests, and that's what this one is going to include. And then also there will be interactive Q&A components. In order to watch these, you have to be a patron saint. And so please consider supporting us on Patreon. Click the link in the description in order to find out more about that. But we wanted to release this one as a general episode. Our first series of In the Lobby episodes involves a discussion with financial analyst and advisor and author Dave Bahnsen, also son of theologian Greg Bahnsen. And so we had a great discussion with him about his new book, Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life, which is all about the theology of work and also how work is portrayed in culture and in entertainment. And so we had a lot of great discussion about that, and you'll get to hear a sampling of that in this clip. Support us on Patreon to watch the rest of the series with Dave Bahnsen, and we hope you enjoy.
In a world where entertainment is viewed as mindless diversion, only good for momentary distraction, one podcast has taken a stand, thoughtfully engaging the art of our day, dissecting the narrative, and pointing the people back to the greatest storyteller of all. You are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to Popcorn Theology, where we examine films for where they align with the greatest story and our greatest storyteller, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption. I'm Richard.
And I'm David. And this time we're stepping away from our usual fare to talk with Dave Bahnsen about his newest book, Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be with you guys.
Awesome. We're really excited about it. Can you just, before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself, basic overview about the book, where people can find more of your work, that sort of thing?
Sure. I mean, in a nutshell, I spend my days running a private wealth management firm called the Bahnsen Group. It's not just a coincidence that the name of the company is the Bahnsen Group. It's actually named after me. But that would be a pretty big coincidence if David Bahnsen was running a firm called the Bahnsen Group and it had no connection. We run about $5.5 billion on behalf of our clients, and I live in New York City and Newport Beach, California. Go back and forth every month between those two cities. And we have offices in 7 locations. And this is the life I chose. The book is about my belief regarding work and vocation and calling and purpose and meaning. And there's a website where people can find all kinds of info on the book, fulltimebook.com. And at that website, we have, video clips and excerpts and reviews and lots of blurbs and bells and whistles and things like that, but it essentially gives people an overview about what the message of the book is about.
Fantastic. Excellent. We're very much looking forward to discussing that. And I will say that I think this is the first time that we've had an economist on our podcast, I believe. We've had film directors, producers, actors, Richard, corrections officers, so there we go, bankers, judges, heavy metal singers, astrophysicists, paleontologists, missionaries, etc. But first time having a financial advisor / economist. And so if we ever had you on to discuss a movie, I would be, to do a typical movie episode, I'd be fascinated to see what we landed on for that. I also wanted to mention that I'm I'm a big fan of your work on the World and Everything in It podcast. And so I know that you're involved with the Monday Money Beat on that. So I listen to you every Monday. Fantastic. I really appreciate your clear and calm analysis. That's definitely appreciated in a age of highly, what's the word, incendiary news. It's nice to have a rational voice in the midst of all that. So I greatly appreciate your work on that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and it means a lot to me because of all the different things I could try to be in such a venue. Rational and calm is near the top of the list, so I'm glad I'm coming near that target. I absolutely love doing that podcast. Those are wonderful listeners, and Nick does a great job, and I think World has done a really wonderful job building out that whole product.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'm going to have to check that out because I'm actually ignorant of this podcast. So I'm going to check that out now that you guys are talking about it.
Yes, highly recommend.
So we always like to ask our guests, no matter what we're talking about. We are primarily a movie podcast. We talk about theology and film. Do you have any favorite movies? Or are you more of like a TV guy? Is there anything that like someone asks that question jumps to your mind?
I love movies more than anyone you have ever had on your podcast.
Wow.
Okay.
And
That's bold.
It's a not guilty pleasure. At one point in my young adult life, had a lot more time to watch movies than I do now. But if it were up to me, I not only would watch many more movies when they come out than I do, I would watch them in a theater and not streaming at home, and I would watch them by myself. Now, I am just taking for granted that my wife is not going to be listening to this because I do love movie dates with my wife too, of course, but I have always loved going to movies by myself too. And I don't know why. I'm kind of a loner at heart. But, it's difficult these days because I find the whole genre of the kind of comic book superhero deal. I may have caught an Avengers or two with my kids when they were growing up, but the entire genre bores me to tears, and that's pretty much taken out like every single movie for 15 years now, it seems. But as a child of the 80s and 90s, my Goodfellas, Scent of a Woman, Shawshank Redemption,
there we go.
A Few Good Men. I have a few of the all-time greats there that I've probably seen 100 times each.
Fantastic. Great choices. I'm curious. You mentioned alone and in a theater. Is that in a theater that is completely empty, or do you mind if there's other people around?
No, I prefer it, but I've never been able to pull that off. I generally have to deal with other customers. I've actually rented out whole theaters before for like client showings of movies and opening night kind of VIP things. So we've done that a couple times, but then I'm inviting other people. But as far as, sometimes you walk in and there's not a lot of other people there. That's always kind of nice. The popcorn line is very short.
I was going to say, if you lived in some of the smaller towns that Richard and I have frequented, then you may have a bit more luck getting an empty theater than in New York or Newport Beach.
One time I pulled it off. Where
I've been in empty theaters many times.
It was me and my son.
Wow.
So preface, I wasn't completely alone, but it was just us. It was a rare occurrence.
If you go like 11 in the morning in Martinsburg, West Virginia to a small theater, you got the whole thing to yourself. No one else is there. No one else is there. You got a good chance.
And they'll still play the movie.
I wonder if no one showed up, maybe they wouldn't. But if I'm there, it's not always the nicest theater, the best time of day, but it's, you get the whole place to yourself, which is pretty nice. So
yeah.
Now I will mention this as we're moving on, in case anybody was wondering why the name Bahnsen sounds familiar. There's a very good reason for that, and I will be ashamed to admit it took me the longest time to put this together myself, that your father was Greg Bahnsen. Do people often make that connection with you, or is that people often don't run in the same circles?
Well, it depends on what the circle is. If people are familiar with me from the world and everything in it, then they certainly do. I mean, if there's a limited number of people that are familiar with Greg Bahnsen, but I think the uniqueness of the last name is usually a pretty good giveaway.
Fair enough. I will say I'm a bit of a putz, and I didn't put it together. I thought, oh, how about that? They had the same last name. Okay. I just, it didn't even occur to me that you were related. And so we've definitely referred to your father a number of times on the show. Big fans of his work. No, probably none more than Richard here.
Yeah, I'm gonna say
So you know that Greg Bahnsen was a bigger movie fan than even I have told you I am. Now
hold on.
That's a guy who watched a lot of movies by himself.
Would you be able to give us his favorite movie?
Ooh.
Or maybe one or two of his favorite movies, because this could be like really interesting information to have.
You heard it here, folks.
Yeah, that's a great question, because he talks so much about the music and the TV shows he liked. But as far as his very favorite movie, you know, he loved the movie The Natural, Robert Redford. But like, I wonder from his own childhood or high school years if he would have had a movie. And I hate to answer for him, because I would only know the movies he loved, you know, that I watched with him in the 80s and 90s. But just as a genre, he did not miss a single James Bond movie. He loved them.
Wow.
And that's back when they were good. And I know his favorite James Bond movie, because he was big on the whole Sean Connery versus Roger Moore thing. He would have said Goldfinger was his favorite James Bond movie.
All right. Good choice.
Nice. So Greg Bahnsen, your father, is probably the most read author that I can think of in my personal life. So I was excited to get to chat with you a little bit. Like Van Til's Apologetic, I return to that about once every 2 or 3 years. That's all I can handle of that book without taking a break from it. Some difficult concepts in there. I don't know if you can even see them, but I pulled a couple of my books out and put beside me just for recording today. But loved a lot of your father's work, and that kind of made me wonder, and maybe this is a good way to segue into discussing the book a little bit more. Did your dad, and I'm going to assume yes, but what impact did your dad have in how you do view work and the theology of work that you have, that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I'll tout another podcast, although it's not an ongoing podcast. I did a little special mini series for the book called On the Hook. And the very last episode was kind of a special double bonus episode of On the Hook, was me going through, I think I probably listened to about 40 sermons and lectures he gave, and I took excerpts from 22 of them and played clips and then offered my own commentary back and forth. You know, we did this whole kind of interactive produced podcast of my dad talking in the 70s and 80s about work. And so he not only had a extraordinary theology of work, but he was very prescient. He was very ahead of his time, talking in the early 1980s about the negative effect that labor unions were having on work, and the danger of adopting more socialistic or progressive policies in the name of helping workers, and in reality what it was doing to the souls of people that God had in fact created to work. So he had a very philosophical, as he did with everything, a very philosophical approach to the subject, and he modeled work in every ounce of breath in his body. So my book is dedicated to him. He was my best friend, my mentor, my hero, and he was the hardest working person I ever saw in my life.
Wow, that's incredible.
We hope you enjoyed this first episode of our In the Lobby series. To watch future episodes, click the link in the description to support us on Patreon and become a patron saint. Subscribe on YouTube for more content, follow and interact on social media to share with others, and remember, you are not a mindless consumer.